So maybe we meet in an elevator. Maybe we're in line at the grocery store and it feels like we've both been there a really long time. Or we're the only two people in the waiting room at the doctor's office and the magazine selection sucks, so here we are. Or maybe I'm standing in front of you wearing a papier-mâché mask in the shape of a coyote skull and you have no idea why. So, we may as well break the ice now. You asked me what I do, and what you mean by that is, what do I do for a living? And by living, you want to know, do I have a career? And by that, what you're asking me is, what is my measurable value as a person in society? And when that man in the elevator asks for my phone number, he always does. I notice he's wearing a really nice watch and his boots are polished, and I think to myself, he would take me to a trendy, upscale restaurant on a first date. It'd be one of those places that serves fusion food, and the cocktails would be $30 a pop, and we would sit across from one another, speaking in code about what kind of investment each of us was. And I once almost married someone because I was so astonished at his ability to be a high-rolling, successful professional and an alcoholic at the same time, that I mistook that astonishment for love, and as he punched holes in the wall next to my head, I said to myself, he has a good job. And once my mother, you love mother stories, right? We all do. My mother was so embarrassed to tell the neighbors that I kept relocating, that I couldn't just pick one place and set down roots, maybe like buy a house, find a husband, something that people are supposed to do. She said it made me appear unstable, and I was like, Mom, I am unstable. In fact, I prefer it that way. It's more fun for me. But what she needed to tell the neighbors whose names I didn't even know, she had to tell them that I had a job. And it wasn't that anyone was especially worried about my survival or my ability to pay my bills. It was that was how I was being measured as a person in the world. That's where my value was coming from. And I had a job. But also that was the year I started writing again. And I was making beautiful things, and nobody asked me what I loved. And I think about the neighbors. Oh God, the neighbors. What will the neighbors think? And the neighbors is everybody we ever encounter who we feel we have to explain ourselves to, right? The neighbors are in all the elevators. They're in traffic with us. They're in the office. 3 doors down. The neighbors are everywhere. And we have this pressure of being observed, and then we start to compartmentalize ourselves. And when we are compartmentalizing ourselves, we can't help but compartmentalize one another. And I said this to someone once, and he said, Nina, you're just a free spirit. I don't know what that means, though. I'm not a free spirit. I don't know what that is. Nothing about me is free. I'm not untethered. I'm not going to float away if you unanchor me. I'm not free. I'm bound. I am bound so tightly to things that I believe in and things that I am building and people that I love. I'm also not a free spirit, really, because I have all of these walls built around me. And they're walls that are built out of criteria based on these expectations. And the expectation they get weird. Like, how long do I have to wait to text after a first date? Expectations about, like, what work means, or what is a real job. Like, being a CEO is more valid than being a bartender. Is that real? Expectations about being a nice girl, whether or not I have to be a nice girl. Expectations about what I am allowed to give. Expectations about what I'm allowed to ask for. I'm going to ask you for something, though. I want to ask you for a moment if you can stop measuring yourself. Measuring yourself by things like approval ratings, your mortgage, credit scores, what kind of car you drive, which neighborhood you live in. I want to ask you if you believe that this structure is really here for us. If you think that this structure was here to make you whole, I want to ask you if you feel whole. Do you believe that you could be whole? And I want to ask you if you're ready for me to take this mask off yet. That is not rhetorical. I will keep asking you. Are you ready for me to take this mask off? Yes. I don't think you are. Yes. I don't think you're ready yet. It's like this. Okay, so we live in these glass houses. We've all heard about glass houses, right? It's a thing. We always talk about them. And we're in these rows, so we're neighbors. We are the neighbors. All of us are the neighbors. We're all the dreaded neighbors, and we can see through the walls, right? So because we can see through the walls, we can see each other, we have this pressure on us of always appearing very well ironed and very well put together. And because we can see each other, we have this illusion of being with each other. But when we put our hands out, we're just pressing our palms against glass. And if we're not touching each other, how do we know anyone else is really there? And now, here we are with this fabricated illusion of connection where we don't have any kind of real connection at all. And all of these conversations are happening in all of these circles about the way that loneliness is killing us. So we're just moving along on these like conveyor belts in our glass houses. And why are we doing it? We're doing it because we have been told that we must. We've been told that if we play it safe, if we play our cards close to our chests, we're going to get ahead. We're getting ahead. We're going to be respected. If we're respected, we're going to be well liked, and then we won't be alone. But what are we getting ahead of? What are we getting ahead of? And does anybody ask you what you love? If we're going to connect, we have to push through that glass. And we live in a world that says, don't let them see you bleed. And this is going to hurt. What would your Tinder profile say if you were telling the truth? Okay, so mine would say, you ready for this? It's real good. Mine would say that, sometimes I stopped eating for days, and I once starved myself until I had a 24-inch waist, and it didn't make me happy. Mine would say that I have commitment issues and irrational fears, and that sometimes I have trouble sleeping, and I have really big issues with overripe bananas, and I get mascara all over the pillowcases. And maybe sometimes I try to cut and run a little too soon. Mine would also say that I love really big, that I'm devoted, and that I am mostly gentle, and that if I love you, I'm always going to believe you. Instead, my Tinder profile says that I'm a witty writer who enjoys peeling small citrus fruits. And when I'm feeling especially revealing, I like to talk about my love of Russian literature. Are you ready for me to take this mask off yet? I don't believe you yet. So this one time, a man threw a beer bottle at me from across the street while I was minding my own business in the middle of an afternoon holding a cup of coffee. And as this bottle came flying toward me, he yelled, "Go read some more of your shitty poetry, bitch." The loudest sound was all that glass shattering at my feet, and he just kept walking, and I cried. Definitely stood there in the street crying. And it's been 14 years, and I'm still afraid of him, but mostly I wonder if he's okay, because These days it seems like nobody is okay, and nobody knows what to do with a grown woman standing in the street holding a cup of coffee, crying over a beer bottle in the middle of the afternoon on a Tuesday. But why? And why was I so ashamed to not have been impermeable? I was more embarrassed that I was affected than that a guy yelled at me in the street and threw a bottle at me. But why? You ask me what I do. And what I want to say is I don't know what I'm doing. And neither do you. And we're standing here with this list of things we're supposed to recite to one another. And my gut instinct is I want you to think that I'm beautiful. I want you to think that I am too cool and too collected to ever be worried or nervous or lose my footing. But we are in this together, and I don't want us to do it that way. I once wore this mask in a carnival, but we're going to talk about that in a moment. I wrote this talk 4 times. No, I wrote this talk like 7 or 8 times, possibly 10. And by round 7 or 8, I realized that I had been trying desperately to give the whole thing this air of academic legitimacy with things like statistics about social isolation and, dictionary definitions for words like bravery or authenticity or radical or vulnerability. And then I realized I'd stripped my whole soul out of it. And the thought of standing here without asking you to let me fall in love with you was horrifying. Why can't I just remind you that we need each other? I don't need to tell you why. You already know it. You already know that we need each other because you have been told to pull yourselves up by the bootstraps. And sometimes when you are alone very late at night, that is a very heavy thought. I don't need to explain to you that we need each other because in case of flood or fire or hurricane or perhaps the event where you need to flee your home country and seek refuge elsewhere, you don't know that I will help you. I don't need to explain to you that we need each other because you already are worried that you're not enough. I don't need to explain to you that we need each other because you already know. The gravity of it already haunts you. So this carnival, it was a carnival of the absurd. And we invited participants to come and meet creatures one after the other. And we would ask them questions. Questions like, what do you love? Questions like, what lie are you telling? Questions like, what do you think of when you look at the night sky? And I realized at some point that it was not theater that I was participating in so much as a reaching for people. Reaching, because when you reach for people, people will reach back for you because we want to. Because we will, because we need to push through that glass. And every time you participate in acts of vulnerability, you are choosing to make more room for your own authenticity. I once watched one man console another man by holding his friend in his arms while his friend wept. And I think it was maybe one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. I thought of what it meant to bridge that gap in a culture that tells our boys to man up, in a culture that shames the sharing of affection and emotions between men. And I thought about how each of them knew in that moment that he was not alone, and of what knowing that means, and of why it is worth it, even though it hurts and is scary. How could you ever build that kind of connection on the back of a status quo? So this mask, it's another structure. Structures can be wonderful things until we begin to forget that we have a shape outside of those structures. You have a shape. Everyone around you has a shape, and every time you choose your own authenticity, you are making room for the authenticity in others. When you say, this is where it hurts, you're opening the door for somebody else to face you and say, I hurt there too. And you are worthy of that kind of connection. We're all worthy of that kind of connection. Every act of vulnerability is a direct rebellion to a status quo that tells you that your value lies on paper. Your value doesn't lie on paper. Your value cannot be measured. You cannot be measured. And so we have these choices. Every day we have a choice to choose bravery and authenticity, to choose to refuse to allow ourselves to be harnessed by invisible criteria and questions about our day jobs when we are so much more profound than that. And I'm going to choose you. Will you choose me?